Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see ya. My name is Dustin Cormier, and welcome to How to Rock Astrology. Today's episode, we're continuing our vibe for tonight. We've been talking about, it's basically very late, and I hardly have any viewers except for one darling. I don't know who's been watching with me, but thank you to my one viewer who's been hanging out with me. Today's episode, we were talking about Pluto in the 11th house. The ideal from the transcripts that we're reading relates, they're talking about the natal position, typically. But you can take the themes of the 11th house, take what's being said about Pluto, and relate it to a Pluto transit as well. As we've just talked about Pluto transits at the start of this series on the outer planets as keys to transformation in our Astrology Karma and Transformation series. We are at the part of this book in this series where Arroyo talks about the individual Pluto and the houses placements. But if you came here just for the Pluto in the 11th, you're in the right place. You don't need to watch the rest of the series to get something out of this video. Anyone with Pluto in the 11th, or who just wants to know about a friend, perhaps, who has Pluto in the 11th, this video, we're going to try to go through it. So, welcome. Pluto in the 11th, basically the big gist that I'm thinking of it. The 11th is a willpower house. It's part of the ego. It's got an egoic grip. It can go really good or really bad. 11th house is about gains, and gains, reputation, external glory. Like, glory is very much the appreciation, the reception of one's glory socially is what the 11th house is really all about. It's Aquarius, and it relates to Aquarius. And the 11th house relates to the image of having done what a community needs, a group needs, a directive needs, or some need in the world, some bit of technology that the whole world needed somebody to put that energy into. And Aquarius, when it's at its best, any planet in Aquarius, in this 11th house vibe, any planet that uses the 11th house at its best is going to be a channel for a community need or directive or some kind of group organization thing, some kind of structure, a creative structure that fits the world around us, the organizations of people around us, that shows fairness. 11th house vibes fight for fairness and fight for recognition of important valued things in a group collective of values. So when we get Pluto in the 11th house, we get the personality of somebody who can be very addicted to the artifice of this glory, of having acted as the channel for something for everybody else, served, or was in some kind of position where they were holding someone's consciousness in a supportive way, as Aquarian consciousness can do. Pluto in the 11th can live for that artifice, for the feeling that they're doing the cool thing that everybody wants them to do, and it can make them end up being addicted to getting gains, to getting rewards, to getting fame, to using networking, to schmooze with different people, to get gains through that, through using human connections, and eventually neglecting the 5th house. That's what happens when you have Pluto in any house has a reflection on the 7th house from itself. So Pluto in the 11th, the opposite aspect to Pluto in the 11th is Pluto in the 5th. shows that Pluto in the 11th house, generally, it manifests as a compulsion to be accepted by other people and to want to look good to other people, and can, by the artifice of doing what they think everybody would enjoy them for, they never act creatively, spontaneously, they never employ their own creative vision of something unique, something that it matters to them, something that relates to their own creative instincts. Pluto in the 11th house is so addicted to looking at what others' needs are that they never think about how they can contribute creatively to that process. And they might have a lot of creativity there, especially if the 5th lord is well placed, because Pluto is looking to integrate the opposite of itself with the house that it's in. Pluto in the 11th wants to integrate the 5th house into the 11th house. It wants to do things for others, to be seen as an important person who contributed something useful, and or who organized and even created a trend, created a consciousness that is something that relates to them, relates to their who they want to be seen as, and through the sun, the steady identity that permeates all their energy. It's not necessarily going to relate to the sun. It's the strength of the 5th lord is important to help integrate the other side of Pluto. And the strength of the 11th lord is going to discern if there gets to be too much of this acting for the sake of trying to emulate what one thinks is useful and practical with others, trying to emulate wealth and gains and being addicted to the artifice of these things, versus cultivating a character. That's what Leo in the 5th house vibe is really about, is using discrimination to cultivate the character, a personality, a philosophy, a lived reaction complex, an ego complex, which enjoys the challenge of using all of itself, the best of itself, through what it is, through what it can cultivate, through its own capacities. These are all 5th house things. And if the 5th house is in a good place, then this person will be able to speak as a voice for higher, corporations or organizations or movements. This person will be able to transmit the scene of the time while still retaining a creative identity that is radiant and attractive and glorious for its own sake. Best example I could give is something like, there's a band called Rage Against the Machine, and they are well known for raging against the machine, for just being very having a chaotic sort of energy. And they have this way of kind of like playing, their inherent philosophy is political. They're a political band, and they shake up through their lyrics. They have this antagonizing principle towards almost quasi-anarchistic, but it's a bit more clever than that. It's really well thought out. And so they are channeling the consciousness of a political vibe, not in a bad political way, but more like an intellectual thinking about politics, making you think more openly and understandably about politics. It's not for any particular party. It's a philosophy that's expansive and kind of radical. And they do this, and, you know, you could see them as just being a political band. Oh, everyone just watches them because they want to get excited about all the things that they talk about, but the music isn't that good. But these guys are, I think, and lots of other people do agree, that they're an example of a solid creative enterprise in themselves. They're a band. They're musicians. Each one of them's got a personality. They are like a leonine, fifth house, creative personalities that are fitted forms through which they can express some kind of vibe, tone, emotional energy, everything. That's what the fifth house is it creates channels for the creativity of the self, the personality. And the emphasis on the fifth, especially if the fifth lord is strong, the person will be discerning about where they use their creative energy, how they use it, what they build. They'll develop skills. They might learn repetitive things and routine, or just sort of actions they can employ that can create. These are all things that this personality will sacrifice if they only focus on networking. If you make one song, one little creative endeavor through the fifth house, but instead of continuing to cultivate channels which will draw more inspiration, more creative ways of using your energy to make more music, thinking about songs in different ways, instead of putting your energy into that fifth house thing, when you've got Pluto in 11th, it's like, well, I've made one song. How do I market it? How do I put a face on it? How do I get a display picture on Spotify with all the things and all the trimmings and put it through DistroKid and get it to people? And like maybe I'll start making stickers and like all these things that are ways of dispersing the product that could bring gains later. It's the house of gains. It's what you can do. You know, the strength of your 11th house means that you can make an ocean out of a dewdrop of material product or creative enterprise. You know, the 11th house brings that out. So a person with a balance of these two will be able to express the best of the leonine creativity of the fifth house and the fifth house lord, if the fifth house lord's strong especially, while still retaining a sense of, like Rage Against the Machine, a sense of a transmission of the social times that is accurate, functional, and useful, and even brings praise for its sensitivity to what was needed in the moment externally to the self. A creative aspect of the times happening, right? That's kind of the 11th house vibe. Mixing these two together is what we want to do when we're dealing with Pluto. So, I've been babbling on a little bit enough, I'd say. This is our reading of Astrology, Karma, and Transformation by Stephen Arroyo. And this is his interpretation of Pluto in the 11th house. Here, Pluto manifests as a compulsion to be accepted by other people and as a need to achieve certain objectives that are not consciously clear. Often, certain fixed ideas have to be changed in order that a rebirth can take place in the areas of one's ultimate desires and sense of purpose. The emphasis upon the future sometimes takes such precedence with these people that the present is neglected. Those with this position of Pluto in their natal charts should learn to rely upon themselves rather than upon others for their fulfillment. Oh, I see, sorry. Awkward grammar for a moment there. Those with this position of Pluto in their natal charts, in the 11th house, should learn to rely upon themselves rather than upon others for their fulfillment, knowing that their deepest hope for the future will be fulfilled only if it encompasses an entire transformation and a clarification of their own creative purpose within the framework of social needs. Now that last line, I want to say it again because I love the way that Stephen Arroyo poetically cinches the whole theme here. Those with Pluto in the 11th in their natal charts should learn to rely upon themselves rather than upon others for their fulfillment, knowing that their deepest hope for the future will be fulfilled, the 11th house will be fulfilled, only if it encompasses an entire transformation and clarification of their own creative purpose within that framework of social needs. I think that that's just a wonderful way to put this whole thing. Within the framework of social needs, within what's going on around the person, within the future, within the technological expansion of that central thing, which is oneself, one's own creative capacities and purposes. Might be a hard thing to do because Pluto makes such attachment to the 11th house, to social groups, to trends, to things that they can latch onto and almost lose their own sense of their grip on their own energetic body of creative capacity. Very cool. So, that was Stephen Arroyo's intention. Stephen Arroyo's transmission of this idea. I can tell I'm getting tired, but that's okay. We have next Pluto in the 11th house, coming from Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabel M. Hickey. Isabel M. Hickey is a Western astrologer. Sorry, don't mind my eyes. Isabel Hickey is a Western astrologer. She was kind of a psychic clairvoyant who lived, I think she wrote in like the 50s, 60s. The first edition of this book was published late 60s, I believe. Jimmy Page read it and recommended it in one of his autobiographies. It's one of the things that got me into astrology. And she uses a Greco mythos symbology in most of the stuff that she writes about, like everything. Sometimes it has Christian theology tones, but more like Gnostic. Gnostic is the right word. Celtic, paganish sort of things. She mixes a lot of different things in, which I think is cool. Classic book. This is the version with writings on Pluto. And that's what I want to add, is a little bit of extra content to our reading of Pluto in the 11th. So, this is Isabel Hickey on Pluto in the 11th house. Isabel Hickey she describes the use of Pluto as Pluto is like the unconscious reactive neuroprogramming of seeing certain things a certain way, neglecting other things as a result of that. There's a deep well of reservoir of neuroprogrammed, instinctive, a grip on a certain way of being that Pluto often reflects. Not everybody has the same degree of this grip, but it's not necessarily such a terrible thing to have this a deep attachment to a certain way of being. If you have the right resources, you can enact a transformation of this energy, and it's one of the deepest transformative energies available in our chart, because it's like one of the last planets. So when everything is posited well for Pluto, Isabel Hickey calls it Minerva. Minerva is our capacity to integrate the two sides of the polarity of Pluto. That's when the reincarnating grip in neuroprogramming is transmuted. Its energy is not dissipated, not thrown away, but restored and put to a more positive conscious capacity through using the natal point of Pluto and engaging its 7th house through having an understanding and the obsessive willfulness of the 11th house, whatever that 11th house is for you, for your rising sign, while also retaining our own creative capacity and enjoyment and motivation through our personal 5th house. Ultimately, what really is going to define the strength of Pluto is the aspects to Pluto, trines from benefic planets especially, and even an opposition from a benefic planet's good in my opinion. Hopefully in the Vedic sense it's not starved or it's got any ill Lajitati Avashtas. Good Shadbala. I'm a Vedic guy, so I always think of these things. But, in any case, positive aspects to the Pluto, as well as, positive aspects to, like, any other positive aspects in that house. And finally, the condition of the dispositor of Pluto, which is the planet that's ruling the sign that Pluto's in. So let's say you're a Gemini rising. That means that you've got Aries in the 11th house. And if Mars is doing well, if Mars is close to the 10th house, if Mars is close to its exaltation in Capricorn, if Mars has good aspects to itself, that will give Pluto a channel of supported channel, a constructive channel through Mars, in this case, if the 11th house is ruled by Aries. Mars finds expression which channels the Pluto energy so that the Pluto doesn't get so hungry for the artifice of fame. It will instead use its desire for fame and networking and positive people power powerfully and strongly and condusively, and they'll hold on to it, and they'll probably be able to use a lot of sway because of that, if the Mars of that 11th house can channel itself effectively, is in a good place, has lots of energy, etc. It's the dispositor of Pluto, of the sign that Pluto's in, as well as aspects to Pluto itself. Positive ones will show that this person can do both of these. So I'm kind of rambling at this point. Let's get into Pluto in the 11th house by Isabel M. Hickey. This is the house of friendships, goals, and objectives. Therefore, the choice of friends and the goals chosen are going to be of the utmost importance. If you have a good 11th Lord, then you will get good things in this regard. You will get good friends, goals, and realistic objectives. Skills, paths to get there. If the wrong choice of friends with Pluto in the 11th, if the wrong choice of friends is made, there can be sudden and unexpected disruptions. Remember that Pluto too often can be unbalanced and uncontrolled power. Great care must be taken in choosing the right groups with which to associate. Great discrimination must be used. Virgo is the 11th house. Virgo is the 11th house sign of Scorpio. There's great necessity to choose your associates with care. This is shown by the underlying tone of Virgo as in this house. They're using Scorpio ascendant as an example. Friends will come and go with Pluto in the 11th house. While they are in your life, serve them well, and you will purge yourself of all the negative inherent of all the negatives inherent with this position of Pluto. Cool. A well-aspected Pluto in this house, especially to Jupiter, Venus, or Uranus, gives great devotion to principles and to ideals that further the development of mankind. Wonderful. That's pretty cool. These people are the leaders who fight for causes that will benefit others. They have charisma, and people are willing to follow them. They have many friends, and without friends, goals and objectives are not achieved. Interesting that both Leo Tolstoy and the Goebbels, who associated with Hitler, had Pluto in the 11th house. One took the high road and one took the low road. So Leo Tolstoy was someone who, he wrote, I can't think of the name of what Leo Tolstoy wrote, but it was an important, compassionate book, and he took the high road, while this Goebbels character, who associated with Hitler, took the low road of Pluto in the 11th. Both of them influenced many people. Right. Goebbels helped Hitler get his whole big influence going on, where Leo Tolstoy influenced lots of people in a positive way through his own creative sake, for a positive reasons. The high soul seeks the high road, the low soul seeks the low, and in between, on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. Pluto never drifts any more than Scorpio does. I wonder if that just means the placement, the evilness of any Pluto depends on the state of Scorpio and Mars. Pluto never drifts any more than Scorpio does. Interesting cryptic last line. Well, we're moving right along, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was Pluto in the 11th by Isabel M. Hickey. And yeah, I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Like, subscribe, do all the things, if you feel so inclined. And if you enjoyed this, check out the start of this video series when I was less tired, and see what, if you enjoyed this, I've been doing this series on Astrology, Karma, and Transformation, and it's been turning out great. So check it out if you feel so inclined. If you liked this, it'll give you a bit more background on Pluto, the meaning of its transits in a chart, and in the meaning of its natal placements in a chart. So thanks for watching, folks. I'm Dustin Cormier.